All right, so the project at hand for right now is I'm working on this 6.5 horsepower engine. It's a Craftsman, similar to a 6.5 horsepower Honda knockoff. Um, and what happened with this is I lost compression. Now, the way I figured that out is I noticed that the pull cord for it was very loose. There was no resistance, so that led me to run a compression test. Now, for those who aren't familiar, running a compression test is very simple. All you have to do is pull the spark plug out and then hook up a compression tester gauge. Now, I have a compression tester gauge here. All it is a little gauge that has pressure markings, pretty much, and then it hooks up on the other end into where the spark plug is. Now, you hook that up, you pull the rip cord a few times, and you should have your pressure gauge go up the side. So probably for some engines it'll be up past 100. These here, it's a lot lower. Should be around, I believe, 50. It's what I had for another engine, about its same size. So it won't be terribly high compression, but nonetheless I had about 0. So I'm going ahead and replacing the piston rings, actually. Now, piston rings can be one of the causes of low compression. It can also be head gasket. My head gasket seemed okay, but I did do a piston ring check after I pulled the piston out, and I did discover some interesting findings. So I'm going to set you up here on the tripod, and I'll show you what I did to kind of check for that. All right, so what I did is I pulled off my 2 piston rings. There's a upper and a lower. The upper one, I don't know if you can tell this on camera, is a little bit silver. That's they call that the compression ring. Even though they're both rings for the compression, the top one is mainly your compression ring. So actually the one on the top of the screen is my compression ring. So what I actually did is I took this piston ring here, and after I took it off the piston, I slid it into the cylinder here. Now, slide it in like that, and you want to square it up as best as you can. So what you can do is you can take the piston and slide it in just a hair, and that'll help square it up. Now, I don't know if you can see, but right down here, there's a little bit of a gap, and there will always be a gap on a piston ring. Now, if the piston ring gap gets too big, then you lose your compression. So I have a feeler gauge here that I got, I think it was at Harbor Freight, or I ordered it on Amazon, and all it does is it has little, I guess, gauges that are thin pieces of metal from small sizes down to 0.0015 inches, so 15 10,000, so a thou and a half, or I can go all the way up to 32 thousandths of an inch. So all you have to do is pick one and put it in the gauge. So let's start here with the 0.35 millimeter, or the 14 thousandths gauge, and we'll see what we get here. So if it slides real nice and easy, let's see here. Yep, so that one is a 0.35 millimeter. Now let's try a 0.43 millimeter and see how that goes. So it goes in, but it's starting to get a little bit tight. So that's probably about where my piston ring is. Now, for a piston this size, a 0.43 millimeter or 17 thousandths gap is on the high side. I would like to see this down a lot closer to the, let's say, the 20 thousandths area, which would be roughly on equivalence of about 0.5 millimeters. So what I'm going to do is I bought new piston rings, and I'm going to put them into the cylinder here, same way I did this one, and I'm going to make sure that the gapping is about correct. Now, if the piston rings are too big by a little bit, you can take them and you can file down the inside edge just a little bit. Don't go too much, because you'll ruin your piston ring. So I'm going to try that out, and I think we should be back in business after we swap out the piston rings, and we'll be good to go. So here's my new rings. I have a oil sleeve here. This kind of separates the oil rings. I have 2 very thin oil seal rings that helps scrape the oil off the cylinder wall so you're not burning oil. And then I have two piston rings. You can tell the one on the top is more of a silver and the one on the bottom is darker. So the one that's more silver is going to go on the top as a compression ring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide that right here in my cylinder. And I'm going to take my piston once again and square it up. And I'm going to use my feeler gauges and re-feel what the gap is there. So let's do that quick here. So let's start off with a 13 thousandths. And that's kind of tight, so that's actually good. So this could be very promising here. So let's go one a little bit thinner. So let's go to the a 9 thousandths, or that'll be a 0.23 millimeter. All right, so that's pretty close there. We want it just snug. If it's too far, then that, like I said, you will have low compression. So we got a silver one here, 0.25 millimeter or 10 thousandths. And that's just starting to get tight. So that should work well. We don't have to do any filing. And I'm going to do the same thing now for the second ring. It should be the same size, but I'm just going to double check here for the second ring down. Now when you're doing this, you want to be very careful not to score your cylinder wall. If your cylinder wall gets scored, you can let too much oil through, and that will not be good. You will have low compression then once again. That feels right about good. So, with that said, I'm going to grab my piston and put the new rings on, and then we'll get the engine all reinstalled again. All right, with the engine aside, I have my piston here. What I'm going to do is I have removed the main piston rings, and I'm going to do the oil control rings now. So all you have to do is you just have to separate them. You can start with the top or the bottom. If you pull too hard, you can actually break these because they are thin. So you just have to kind of work them out all the way around, and that will come right out. So there's one. We can toss that aside, and we'll do the next one here. Now be very careful when you're reinstalling these, because if you stretch them too far, they will snap and they will be junk. You cannot use snapped rings for this. Alright, so before I go ahead and put the new piston rings on, I'm just going to take a paper towel. I'm using shop paper towels, and I'm just going to clean this off, make sure there's no dirt in there. Alright, so we will start with our oil ring separator right here. Now I believe there's another term for this. I'm not sure what it is. But we'll put that on right there. And we'll double check and make sure. This may be, yep, that'll be good there. I'll double check it with this other one. Now, this other one seems a little bit thicker and a little bit bigger. So, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to reuse, actually, this old one. It's still in fine shape. It's not broken. These are usually okay. I don't tend to see these broken unless you take them off and they're broken. So, I'm just going to actually slide that one back on. That's real nice there. Now, we'll take our two oil rings, slide those on. Once again, being real careful here to not snap them. So you want to be real gentle, work them around. Don't try to open them up and slide them on. All right, so there's one. And let's do the second one here. Just work it in the groove real slow. All right, very nice. So that's all set. And now we will move on to our compression rings. Now, they have a tool for this, of which I have. It's just a pair of pliers that has little, I don't know what they're called, but they're little angles on the end. And what you can do is you take your ring and you slide it in those little angles there, and now you can actually open up the ring a little bit. So we'll take this and we'll open it up just to get it past. Once again, don't go too far, otherwise you risk ruining and damaging the ring. So we'll put that in there, slide that in. Okay, it should squeeze easily. It won't be fully together, and that's okay. We'll squeeze it together when we actually put it in the engine. Now we'll do the top one. Once again, that's the silver one. Just wide enough to get it over, and just like that, it's in. Not much to that. And those are all squish in when we do it. Now, a very crucial part of this is you do not want your gaps to be in line. So as you can see here, they're in line. You don't want that. Spin them about 120 degrees, and that should be fine, as well as for your oil rings down here. So you can see, hopefully, there's a gap on one there, and there's also a gap here, so we'll spin one around. Try not to have all 4 rings line up. They may spin later, and that's okay, but when you put them in, they were not aligned, and so they shouldn't become aligned again. So I'm going to spin it about 90 degrees, so that there's a 90-degree gap in between them all. So I'll do 180 between the oil control rings, roughly, and then 180 between your main piston rings. So let's bring the engine back, and we'll get her installed. All right, so to put this piston back in, obviously it won't go in with the piston rings out like that. They're going to have to get squeezed. So I have a special tool here. This is a piston ring compression tool. It's just some sheet of metal that goes around in a circle, and you tighten it up with a key, and it compresses everything in the circle, allowing you to pound it in. You can get them at AutoZone. I think they're $10 to rent. I happen to have one here, so we'll use that. Before I put it in there, I'm just going to double check, make sure that my rings are not overlapping each other, and they look good there. So I'll take the tool, and then all I have to do is crank it up. Alright, so if you look in there, there is not much light coming through there. A little bit there. That'll be alright. We should be able to put it in. I can always tighten it up another crank or so here. Alright, so just remember the way this came out. This one actually happens to be universal. Some are not, so just be aware of that. I know I had a V-twin engine that was not universal. So just make sure that it goes in the correct way. This one can go in either way. So what we'll also do, you do have to make note, I don't know if you can see it in there, my piston does have a divot in it. That will be important for the valve cover. So make sure that that goes in the right way, and then we'll be good to go. Alright, so based on my valve cover, I need to put it in like that with my big circle, which I don't know if you can see on camera. It may be hard. Oh, there you go. Now you can see it. It needs to go on the right-hand side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure the surface is clean, make sure everything else with your piston is clean, and all we have to do is just slide it in like this. Nice and smooth. Now, to put it in the rest of the way, all you have to do is pound lightly, very lightly, to get it to go in. Usually something rubber works well, so I got some needle nose pliers with some rubber handles that should work fine to tap it. And all you have to do is hold down tight and push it in, and it's in. So that's as simple as it is for replacing the piston rings, and I'm just going to put this on time lapse, and I'm going to put the rest of the engine back together. So we'll see you when it's finished. So I have the engine back together now, and before I put the spark plug in and mount it back on the stand, I want to just make a quick compression test and make sure that the repair that I did here with the new piston rings is fixed. So I'll go ahead and screw in my compression tester hose right into the spark plug area. Just thread it in. All right, I have my pressure gauge here. So now all we have to do is we'll pull the cord a few times and we'll see what type of compression we get. Alright, so if you can see the pressure gauge here, this line up there is 50, down here is 25, so we're reading about 45, which is fantastic. That should be about where we want to be. So let's go ahead and finish assembly this, and then we'll test it out. So I have the engine all mounted back on the little cart. Now we'll fill it up with oil and some fuel, and then we'll test it out. So on this engine, there's no oil dipstick. The oil comes right till it's about to drip out of the oil plug here. So we'll fill it up till it gets to that point. Alright, so you can see it overflowing a little bit. So that's all full, so that's good. I'll take a little paper towel, wipe it up so that we don't have a big mess. And we'll fill it up with some fuel and test it out. All right, let's see how we did. Choke is on, in the run position. All right, so it looks like it's working once again, which is fantastic. Our piston ring must have done the trick. We had good compression, fuel. The only thing I do notice, I don't know if you can catch it on camera, I have a little gas leak from my gas line that comes down from my fuel tank. So I'm going to get a new gas line. I'll fix that up. But other than that, I'll put the pressure washer pump back on and we'll be back in business with this thing. So that's a repair that it's not too hard to do. Most people could probably do it. You can use this video to help you out. And let's go work on something else now.